to The Catholic Perspective, a podcast brought to you by rcspirituality.org. Enjoy the episode.
Some straight talk about social justice, Part 1.
Philosophers through the ages have likened human society, any society, the concept of society, to a large ship. Just as a ship is meant to take its passengers and crew on a journey to safety and prosperity through the treacherous waters of the sea, so human society is meant to help its members better achieve their dreams of freedom and happiness. And just as the passengers and crew of a ship have to work together in order to reach their destination, avoiding, under the guidance of the captain, all the dangers that crop up along the way, so the members of a society have to work together to reach their destination under the guidance of a governmental authority. Social justice is a term the Church uses to refer to a healthy ship, to a society whose members are working well together and heading in the right direction. Basically, Church teaching about society and social justice can be summed up in what are commonly referred to as the three pillars of Catholic social doctrine: the common good, subsidiarity, and solidarity. These are the three key ingredients for a healthy or just society. When Catholics talk about social justice, then, they're talking about one or another aspect of these three pillars. The most important of the three is the common good. It refers to the goal of human society. Human beings live in society in order to achieve the common good. The other two pillars are principles that need to be respected for society to successfully achieve that goal. They are prerequisites, so to speak, of the common good. Even though these terms are frequently used in church documents and bantered about by plenty of political theorists and social scientists, many Catholics still have only a vague understanding of what they really mean. This is a double tragedy. On the one hand, it inhibits their own pursuit of happiness, because these principles shed light on how all human beings are meant to live. On the other hand, it shrinks their ability to contribute to society's development. Ignorance of these principles makes it hard for Catholics to interpret social and political issues from a truly Christian perspective, which in turn makes them vulnerable to false, often damaging, non-Christian interpretations. Therefore, it is worthwhile to spend a few minutes admiring some of the brighter jewels among these treasures of Catholic social teaching. This talk will take an inside look at the common good. A second talk will examine subsidiarity and solidarity. Understanding the concept of the common good requires understanding the origin of human society itself, one of those topics that philosophers have never stopped discussing. In fact, one could argue that the history of modern philosophy is little more than an ongoing conversation about the origin of human society. Heavy hitters like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Georg Hegel, Karl Marx, and Auguste Comte made their philosophical mark by pontificating on the question. Although it would be interesting and worthwhile to examine each of their contributions in detail, such an endeavor is a bit beyond the scope of one talk. Nevertheless, it is fair to summarize these and other influential modern currents of thought as falling into two basic camps: those who give human society too little importance, and those who give it too much. The truth about the origin of human society lies in between these two extremes. The real answer to the question, why do people live in community, is simply that they are meant to. Here's how the Catechism puts it. Quote, "The human person needs to live in society. Society is not for him an extraneous addition, but a requirement of his nature. Through the exchange with others, mutual service and dialogue with his brethren, man develops his potential. He thus responds to his vocation." End quote. In other words, individuals can only achieve fulfillment by living in society. And society is only healthy when it is helping each of its members achieve their authentic fulfillment as human persons. The image of the ship helps us grasp this idea. A large ship is more seaworthy than a little rowboat, so it has a better chance of traversing dangerous oceans and surviving violent storms. So people who find themselves at sea are wise to sign on as passengers on a large ship. But in order to keep the ship functioning well and on course, it takes a lot of effort. Everybody has to pitch in, The captain and crew will do most of the heavier work, but the passengers will provide the money, follow the ship's rules, and chip in here and there when they can help with the chores. The ship as a whole exists for the sake of those traveling, but those who are traveling have an absolute need for the ship and the ship's community. Such is society. Without it, individuals and even families or small communities find themselves adrift. They can't achieve their full human potential all by themselves. Of course, we don't need to be naive. Original sin has given everyone a strong tendency to selfishness, which creates a certain tension between the individual and his need to live in society. Living in society necessarily involves imposing limits on personal freedom. The captain gives passengers a curfew and rations out the food, for instance, in order to make for a safer journey. But those limits can go against the grain of human selfishness, causing resentment. Sometimes that resentment boils over into violence. This is why ships have mutinies. Easing this natural tension between individuals, groups, and society at large, making sure it doesn't erupt into destructive violence, is really what social justice is all about. Social justice is the communal effort to create and maintain conditions that assure everyone an equal and optimal opportunity to fulfill their human potential. The Church calls those conditions the common good. The Catechism defines the common good as, quote, the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily, end quote. The definition itself expresses the fluidity of the reality. More fully and more easily implies a constant effort to improve, a constant adjusting to changing circumstances and needs. Pursuing the common good is not like building a bridge, which takes a lot of effort and planning and work to get done, but once it's up, it's up. Pursuing the common good is more like navigating that ship through uncharted waters. It takes constant attention and unending adjustment. The Catechism goes on to point out 3 essential elements of the common good, 3 characteristics that can be used as a litmus test for a healthy society. The first essential element is respect for the rights of every human person, most especially by respecting their essential freedoms, like the freedom of worship, the freedom to form a family, and the freedom of conscience. Social conditions that habitually infringe on basic freedoms violate the common good, robbing its members of the opportunity to fulfill their human vocation. The education system under Soviet communism in the first half of the 20th century is an example of such infringement. It required all children to receive education in state-run schools, which inculcated atheism. Any parents who tried to instruct their children in religion were apprehended as criminals. This contributed to social conditions of terror and oppression, a far cry from the common good. The second essential element is prosperity, or the development of the spiritual and temporal goods of society. This consists in making available to all members of society the basic necessities of a truly human life, like food, clothing, shelter, work, healthcare, education, and culture. This doesn't mean that the government has to directly provide everyone with all these things, but a government does need to make sure that somehow, maybe through providing incentives for mediating structures like local charities or community task forces, its citizens are not being deprived of these basic goods, especially the weakest and most vulnerable citizens who are simply unable to provide for themselves through no fault of their own. But prosperity doesn't stop with making available the minimum. The common good also requires that a society be able to grow and develop. This is one of the reasons why the Church has always defended the right to private property and personal initiative. By working hard and wisely administering one's material wealth, a poor family ought to be able to lift itself to a more secure material status, for instance, which is impossible without an accumulation of private property. Likewise, aid to developing societies should be given in such a way as to encourage the members of that society to take the initiative in furthering their own development. By offering low-interest loans for starting small businesses, for instance, or by providing training in more advanced agricultural techniques. Such approaches foster development instead of just making societies more and more dependent on outside assistance. But it doesn't stop with material prosperity. which is why the term social justice should never be used only to refer to economic equality. The common good also requires cultural and moral prosperity, because those are integral dimensions of the human person. If the children's section of your public library were full of pornographic magazines, for instance, you could hardly call that community healthy, even if everyone who lived there had plenty of food and quality health care. The third essential element of the common good is peace, defined by the Catechism as the security and stability of a just order. In a good society, people don't have to live in constant fear of violence and crime. They can carry out their duties freely and serenely. War, revolution, and civil strife, though sometimes necessary in order to recover peace, are in and of themselves damaging to the common good, which is why they should always be last resorts. The role of government is to promote this common good, coordinating the activities and efforts of individual citizens in smaller communities, like families and businesses, to achieve that common goal of respect for human rights, prosperity, and peace. Therefore, governmental authority is naturally limited by the requirements of the common good. That's why even if a free democratic referendum voted to legalize slavery, the government would be abusing its authority and forfeiting its legitimacy if it did so, because slavery directly contradicts one of the basic elements of the common good, respect for every human person. Governments are at the service of the true good of their citizens, not of the latest ideological whim and fashion. Just as a captain of a ship has no authority to throw an innocent passenger overboard, so a government has no authority to legalize discrimination or any other practice that would harm the common good. The common good, the sum total of social conditions that enable individuals and groups to achieve their fulfillment more easily and more fully, is the most important principle of the Church's social teaching. It is the goal and measuring rod of social justice. It is the thickest of the three pillars, but alone it can't support the immense weight of social ethics. It needs the two other pillars as well, subsidiarity and solidarity. But those two are pretty thick as well, thick enough, anyway, to deserve their own talk. And that's some straight talk about social justice.
You have been listening to The Catholic Perspective, a resource from rcspirituality.org. Please visit our website and check out more great resources to help you pray, learn, grow, and go. Please join our team of digital missionaries by subscribing at rcspirituality.org.